Investment firms hire economists to forecast upcoming releases. News organizations built financial reporting teams dedicated to explaining economic data. Dial had become the focus point of economic attention, a number for everything. Over time, economists developed an entire ecosystem of indicators: GDP measuring total production, unemployment rates tracking labor market conditions, inflation indexes measuring changes in prices, productivity statistics estimating how effective labor and capital produced output. Consumer confidence surveys attempted to capture the expectations of households. Each indicator focused on a particular dimension of economic activity. Together, they created a statistical portrait of the economy. The rise of computing technology dramatically expanded the scale of this measurement. Modern statistical agencies collected data from millions of businesses and households. Economists now had estimate production across hundreds of industries, analyzing regional economics trends, tracking changes in productivity across decades. The dial had become highly sophisticated, yet fundamental limitations remains. Indicators describe outcomes. They do not explain mechanisms. GDP tells us how much the economy produced. Unemployment tells us how many people lack jobs. Inflation tells us how prices are changing. But none of these numbers reveal the force generating those results. The numbers record the results. It does not explain the cause. Because economic indicators are so visible, it's easy to mistake them for the economy itself. When the numbers improve, commentators speak as if the system is healthy. When they deteriorate, they describe the economy as failing. But the numbers are signals, not the system. They are measurements of outcome produced by deeper processes. Recognizing that distinction is essential, because if we want to understand the economy, why it grows, why it stagnates, why it experiences crisis, we cannot rely on numbers printed on the dial. You have to look inside the clock. That is where the story of the modern economy truly begins. The problem with numbers. By the middle of the 20th century, the dial of the economic clock had become impossible to ignore. Every few weeks, new numbers appeared. GDP growth, inflation, unemployment, stock market indexes, interest rates. These statistics became dominant in the public conversation about the economy. Newspapers reported them on front pages. Television networks built entire programs around interpreting them. Governments scheduled press releases to discuss their meaning. The numbers created the impression the economy had become measurable in a precise and scientific way. And in some respects, it had. Economists could now estimate the size of national output, track changes in employment, and observe how prices moved over time, compared with the uncertainty that policymakers faced during the early years of the Great Depression. The modern statistical system represented enormous progress. But the growing authority of these indicators also created a subtle problem. People began to confuse the number with the system itself. When the numbers move in strange ways, occasionally economic indicators behave in a way that seem to contradict everyday experience. A country may report strong GDP growth while many households feel their financial situation is deteriorating. Unemployment may fall while wages remain stagnant. Stock markets may rise dramatically during periods when the broader economy appears weak. These contradictions often produce confusion. How can the economy be growing if people feel worse off? Why would financial markets stagnate? Why would financial markets surge while businesses struggle? The answer lies in what the number actually means. GDP measures the values of goods and service produced within an economy. It does not measure how that value is distributed across the population. An economy may produce more outputs than ever before, while gains are concentrated among a relatively small number of firms or individuals. From the perspective of GDP, production has increased. From the perspective of many households, living standards may not have improved at all. The unemployment rate has similar limitations. The stats count people who are actively searching for work but unable to find jobs, but does not capture workers who have stopped looking entirely, nor does it reveal what new jobs pay or less than ones that disappeared. The numbers summarize the condition of the labor market, but it cannot describe the complexity of the changes occurring within it. Even stock markets, perhaps the most visible economic indicator of all, measure only a narrow slice of the economy. Share prices reflect expectations about future profits of the publicly traded companies, but millions of businesses around the world are not publicly traded. Small companies, family owned firms, local service providers, and independent contractors rarely appear in stock market indices. Yet they employ enormous number of people and produce significant portions of economic activity. The stock market may therefore surge even while larger parts of the economy struggle. What the numbers cannot see. What the numbers cannot see. Another limitation arises from the fact that economic indicators measure only certain types of activity. GDP records transactions that occur in the market. Many important activities never pass through markets at all. Parents caring for children, neighbors helping each other repair homes, communities organizations volunteer work. These activities create value. They support families and social networks. Yet because they do not involve market transactions, they remain, they, lar- they remain largely invisible to GDP. Technological changes create challenges as well. Digital services often provide enormous benefits while generating little measured revenue. Search engines, online maps, open source software, and free educational resources allow people to access information that would have been expensive or impossible to obtain only a few decades ago. Yet, because many of these services are provided at no cost to users, their contribution to GDP appears surprisingly small. The economy may be transforming dramatically while the dial only moves slightly. Adam Smith and the hidden mechanisms. More than a century before GDP was invented, the economist Adam Smith had already pointed towards the deeper focus forces shaping economic activity. In The Wealth of Nations, published in 1776, Smith argues that prosperity did not rise simply from the accumulation of money. It emerged from organization of production. Smith's most famous example provides a small pin factory. A single worker attempting to manufacture pins alone could produce only a few each day. But when the process was divided into specialized tasks, drawing the wire, cutting it, shaping the point, attaching the head, productivity increased dramatically. The division of labor transforms production. What mattered was not the number of coins circulating through the economy, but how the structure of that system produced goods. Smith was describing something that the economic indicators alone cannot reveal: the mechanism, the organization of labor, the network of production that converts resources into output. GDP can record the value of pins once they are sold, but it cannot fully capture the transformation and productivity that occurs when production systems become more effective. Keynes and the instability of the system. Another economist who understood the limitations of simple measurements was John Keynes. Writing during the Great Depression, He observed that economies sometimes experience prolonged periods of stagnation even when factories, workers, and technology remained available. The problem, he argued, lied in the dynamic of investment and demand. Business invest when they expect future profits. Consumer spend when they feel confident about income. If confidence collapses, spending declines and investment falls. The result can be a spiral downward in the economy activity. GDP numbers reveal the outcome of this process, declining production, but they do not explain the psychological and financial mechanisms that cause the decline. He believed governments sometimes had to intervene to stabilize the system. Yet, even in his theories relied Yet even his theories relied on looking beyond the indicators themselves. The numbers recorded the motion of the economy, but forces driving the economy lay deeper within the system. The limits of the dial. The problem with the economic indicators, then, is not that they are wrong, it is that they're incomplete. They provide essential information about the condition of the economy, but they cannot tell the whole story. Indicators show whether production is rising or falling. They show whether prices are stable or accelerating. They show whether employment is expanding or contracting, but they do not reveal the underlying mechanism producing those changes. To understand those mechanisms, we must look beyond the numbers. We must examine the structure that organizes economic activity. Energy systems power the machines. Factories transform raw material into goods. Market conditions coordinate millions of decisions. Financial institutes stabilize investments. These components form the hidden machinery of the economic system. The numbers we watch every morning reflect the movement of that machinery, but do not explain it. Which brings us to the central idea of this book. Most people think they understand the economy because they see the dial. Most people think they understand the economy because they see the dial. They watch GDP growth, unemployment rates, and stock market movements. But the dial is only the surface. To understand the system itself, we must open the clock. The broken clock. Imagine standing in front of a large mechanical clock mounted on the wall of an old railroad station. The dial is clear and easy to read. Two long hands sweeping across the numbers. Travelers glance up at while rushing towards departing trains. A quick look tells them whether they're early or late. For most people, the clock is the dial, the numbers, the hands, the time displayed on the face. But anyone who's ever opened a mechanical clock knows that the dial is only the surface of a much more complicated machine. Behind